Hey there, fellow travelers. Welcome to episode 367 of the Tolkien Road, or episode 3 in the Do Not Be Hasty Reckoning. Greta?
Hey.
Can I call you Greta?
Why not?
Why not? Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
All right. Before we begin, we'd like to give a double up air five to our amazing fellowship. Stick 'em up, fellowship. 3, 2, 1. Very nice.
That was very good.
Yep. Special thanks to this episode's executive producers, Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien, John R, Melkor27, and KG. And a big thank you to our newest patrons, Harrison C, Dominic, and Dr. William Hutton, who is returning as a patron. So
Nice.
Welcome back,
yes.
Doc.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for joining and rejoining our fellowship. Of course, Dr. William Hutton never actually left us in our hearts, right? He's always
so
been,
true.
He's always been right
Absolutely. There.
Yep. Shout out to Daniel D, Matthew W, and Jonathan R for boosting and annualizing their pledges.
Oh, sweet.
So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate the support after the last 2 episodes of this new journey. So thank you very much, and hope we get some more folks on board with our fellowship for the rest of this very long journey.
Yes.
All right, so a shout out to those celebrating their fellowship anniversary in March of 2024. Peter B, Paul D, Stephen S, Jay Z, Bethany E, Daniel D, and Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien. Thank you all so much for sticking with us over the years. All right. In this episode of Do Not Be Hasty, Gandalf arrives with fireworks in tow and references a mysterious plan of Bilbo's. This section begins with the words, "That very month was September," and ends with the words, "Hoping for invitations." All right. So really, we kick this chapter off with this arrival of Gandalf and the expectation of fireworks. It says, "That very month was September and as fine as you could ask." A day or two later, a rumor, probably started by the knowledgeable Sam, was spread about that there was going to be fireworks. Fireworks, what is more, such as had not been seen in the Shire for nigh on a century, not indeed since the old Took died. So, really, we get, we're told that basically that Sam started this rumor, right? That there were going to be fireworks. And, this got me thinking about a couple of different things with regard to Sam. First of all, they mentioned Sam only by first name right here, and this is still pretty early in the book, so I was like, okay, how often have they mentioned Sam? And I remembered at the end of the last section we did, Sam is mentioned by his first name by the gaffer, who is his father. And so I think that's why Tolkien didn't feel like he needed to say, like, Sam Gamgee, the son of, right? So it was like, it's clear we should already kind of know that Sam, of course, all of us know this, right? If you have any experience with The Lord of the Rings, you know who Sam is. But if you're reading it for the first time, you're like, oh, so Sam is the son of the gaffer, right? Hamfast Gamgee. And so he is the one who is spreading this rumor. He seems to know Bilbo and Frodo pretty well, as compared to most of the other hobbits in the Shire and even Hobbiton. So Sam is the one who apparently starts this rumor, and that got me thinking, how old is Sam in the year 3001 of the Third Age when this is all happening? So what would you have guessed? I don't. You can see my notes. I'm not sure if you know without guessing.
Mm-mm.
All right. So how would you guess Sam is?
Well, with him and Frodo being, such good buddies, I would think that they're close in age. And this is Frodo's 33rd birthday. So I don't know. I would say he's probably early 30s, maybe a little younger.
Yeah. So he's 21. So he's 21. He was born in the year Third Age 2980.
Okay.
So yeah, you'd think that, and I think this is where maybe the film, and this is a very minor criticism, but maybe the film can be a little bit misleading because they do certainly seem like they are about the same age in the film, right?
Do. Yeah.
And given that hobbits do come of age at 33, I don't think, I don't know that 12 years is like that large a gap necessarily. Maybe hobbits seem to have a little bit of a longer lifespan than human beings. But I still think there's like kind of a, I still think that's significant enough an age gap to say like they're not necessarily just like, contemporaries or something like that, right? Like you might say. but Frodo's not like of an entirely different generation, I would say either.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. I was trying to think about, because the generation is typically what, like 20 years?
Yeah,
or so?
I mean, I would say like if you are an adult and know somebody as a like young child, and that's pretty clearly I mean,
different generation.
It all different views will classify the length of generations in different ways. I feel like generations nowadays are more like 20 or 30 year periods, but anyway, I think this is probably kind of right. They're still of the same generation. Perhaps Frodo's just older of that generation and Sam is younger. Both of them would have been, would not have been alive when Bilbo went on his original journey. Right?
Gotcha.
So
Yeah, that makes sense.
So in that sense, they are kind of a similar generation. But anyway, Sam is the one who starts this rumor of fireworks, apparently.
That reminds me of, like, I think it's in the movie. It shows him, like, lurking, like, outside the windows. So maybe he's a little bit of an eavesdropper.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think it's I think it just shows some of Sam's excitement, and it's kind of this initial indication that he has a special interest in these adventures that Bilbo goes on, and all these, like, kind of Sam has this thing within him that even though he is very much of the Shire and of Hobbiton, he has sort of there's a little bit of a dreamer in him, and there's a little bit of the wanderlust in him, and he's just interested in all of the things, right?
Especially Olifants.
Especially Olifants, which we will not really deal in depth with for a long time, I suppose. For many episodes.
Yeah.
All right. So we get description of the first wagon. It says it's laden with odd-looking packages and driven by outlandish folk, and they're described as dwarves with long beards and deep hoods. Right. So these are not the kinds of folks that you normally see in the Shire driving this first wagon that's going to Bag End. But Gandalf is not actually on this particular. Oh, sorry. You're looking at the text.
Sorry, I just wanted to move that. I wanted to move.
I've got my
page.
Kindle pulled up on the screen here so that we can follow along. And Yep. So
sorry.
You're good. I was just wondering what you were doing. You normally don't take control of the mouse when we're recording. So I was like, what is going on here? Some kind of mutiny or something? Greta's taking over, everybody.
Watch out, y'all.
Watch out. Yeah, so the first wagon, no Gandalf. The second wagon is the one with Gandalf. So it says, an old man was driving it all alone. He wore a tall, pointed blue hat, a long gray cloak, and a silver scarf. He had a long white beard and bushy eyebrows that stuck out beyond the brim of his hat.
Okay,
right?
Can we stop right there,
yes.
please? Because I actually thought about this for a little while. I was like, okay, bushy eyebrows that stuck out beyond the brim of his hat.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, so the brim, I had to think about, the brim is around, right? The hat, okay? So a sun hat, right, has a very wide brim, right? So it covers your face. And I'm thinking the brim of Gandalf's hat is pretty wide too, right? I mean, you think of wizard hats having a pretty wide brim. And I was like, those are some bushy eyebrows.
Those are some serious eyebrows.
Because then I was like, okay, maybe the brim is actually the seam that connects the top with the rim. Yeah. But no, I think the brim
I wonder if he's maybe he's kind of wearing it back on his head. Maybe he's going really fast, so it's just kind of get pushed back.
Back here.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was like, if his brim is here, and I was like, dang. Those were some bushy eyebrows.
He's going so fast, it's just like pushing his hat back, and his eyebrows are getting lifted up, by the airflow, right? He's hitting his face.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm sure that's
a lot of physics.
I'm sure that's what Tolkien was thinking.
You're talking
no, I'm just
about.
kidding. Yeah, it certainly is a, as much as Tolkien is all about the verisimilitude. There are a couple of moments where you're just like, I'm not sure exactly how that would work.
Exactly. I was trying to picture it. And I was like, okay, so if his brim is this wide, that means his eyebrows are okay, if this is his brim, that means his eyebrows are going to be like that bushy. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Pretty.
I think I thought about it for too long, but it made me chuckle.
It does, and it is a humorous appearance, but of note, he's got this blue hat, this gray cloak, and this silver scarf, and I believe this is exactly how he was described in The Hobbit when he arrived at Bilbo's home in The Hobbit.
Makes sense.
So interesting little I can never think of the word I'm trying to think of, but just kind of repeat, right, of history and of description there, like, so many years ago, and then here he is kind of looking the same. I don't know, maybe that in itself should tell us something, that it's all this time has passed and he still kind of looks the same, dresses the same.
He's not of this world.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the point that I was getting to. He's viewed as a party magician by the people of the Shire, right?
Yes.
But little did they know that a god was among them, right? So Gandalf is a Maya, right? He is a lesser god of the Blessed Realm. He was a god of Lorien, so he was subordinate to Lorien, kind of attached to this Valar, right? This Vala, who was the master of dreams. And his original name in Quenya, the language of the Blessed Realm, actually means dreamer. So his original name was Olorin, right? He is a disciple of Nienna, also the goddess of grief and tears. And he was sent to Middle-earth by Manwë, who is the Lord of the Airs, right? So, and really the top of the top of all of the gods of Arda, right? Of this world that Middle-earth is part of. So, you just kind of think about that. Like, here these hobbits are just kind of carrying on with their business, and this, wizard shows up, and they think of this wizard as just kind of like this, like, little bit of a troublemaker. Like, they view him with suspicion. He just comes and he does like tricks, and he like kind of fills the Hobbit children's minds with all these thoughts of adventures and a wider world out there. But really, like, not essentially harmless, right? I mean, he's certainly not, they know he's not coming to like do like direct evil or anything like that. But they really have a sense of like his powers, right? Other than just being like maybe an old man who maybe has some tricks up his sleeve. He is in fact a god, right? And that's just a very interesting thought to consider, that the hobbits, most of them, and probably truly, I mean, Bilbo has a greater sense of what he's capable of, most likely, but
of course, yeah.
But beyond that, like, the hobbits just don't know, right? They don't know who this guy really is.
They don't know the full extent of his powers.
Yeah.
And
just like, literally that, like, his, he has been in existence for ages, right? For thousands and thousands of years, right? So there was an interesting note in the Reader's Companion, the Hammond and Skull Reader's Companion, right here. This bad boy.
It's so pretty.
It is very pretty.
It's really pretty.
There's an interesting note about this section concerning Gandalf. So I'm going to read this. Let's see here. Try not to mess up my microphone too much. All right. It says, Gandalf the Wizard is introduced in The Hobbit, Chapter 1, as an old man with a staff. He had a tall pointed blue hat, a long gray cloak, a silver scarf over which his long white beard hung down below his waist, and immense black boots. He looked at Bilbo from under long bushy eyebrows that stuck out further than the brim of his shady hat. Tolkien drew at least 4 pictures of Gandalf, in none of which did he attempt to represent the wizard's eyebrows with the same exaggeration as in the text. That, it's interesting to me that he never, like, in his depictions, he never like tried to emphasize the eyebrows that much. I don't know. I certainly it's obviously comical for us to think about somebody having eyebrows that stick out that far, right? Yeah. To the point of, like, if you saw him depicted in that way, would you really like be able to take him seriously? I don't know.
Then why does Tolkien like mention that, not just in The Hobbit, but then again here? Why does he, like, it seems that he really kind of makes note of that and emphasizes that. But it's interesting that he never actually drew him in that way.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Maybe it is just wanting people to like stop and think and just chuckle a bit. I don't know.
It's possible, right? I mean, yeah. I feel like all of these scenes that take place in the Shire and amongst the culture of hobbits are intended to be a little bit like, it's almost like in this wider world where there is this obvious like great history and everything like that. It's like the Shire is actually the fantasy world, right? It's like an inversion of what's the fantasy world. So you and it's not just here. We're going to talk about some other things over in this episode and over the course of, the next several episodes where it kind of breaks that spell of verisimilitude, and you feel like you're reading something that's a little bit just like that's more like a
Fanciful.
traditional fairy tale, like has a lot of whimsy and and like kind of fancy to it, yeah. So that's my best ability to explain it, is that Tolkien, when we're in the Shire, he just doesn't like care as much, right, about the verisimilitude, you might say. But I don't know, he probably would take issue with that, but yeah, I don't know. I'm genuinely stumped by the bushy eyebrows. I really am. It goes on to say in his let's see. In his biography of Tolkien, Humphrey Carpenter links the wizard to a postcard depicting an old man in a red cloak and a long white beard, which Tolkien called the origin of Gandalf. Carpenter believed that Tolkien purchased this reproduction of a work by the German painter Josef Madlener during a walking tour of Switzerland in 1911. But Manfred Zimmermann, The Origin of Gandalf in Josef Madlener, shows that the painting, Der Berggeist, the mountain spirit, belongs rather to the mid-1920s. Marjorie Burns in Gandalf and Odin, Tolkien's legendarium essays on the history of Middle-earth, suggest that Gandalf shares certain attributes with the Norse god Odin. The most distinctive features of Gandalf, his hat, beard, staff, and penchant for wandering, are the key characteristics that Odin displays when he leaves Asgard and travels in disguise through the plane of human existence, the Middle-earth of Norse mythology. During these earthly journeys, Odin does not appear as a stern and forbidding deity or a bloodthirsty god of battle, but rather as a gray-bearded old man who carries a staff and wears a hood or cloak, usually blue, and a wide-brimmed floppy hat. So certainly sounds a lot like this version of Odin.
Yeah, for sure.
So interesting details and background concerning the appearance of Gandalf. There. So I do have a video that kind of goes through and the depiction of Gandalf in Peter Jackson's films and compares them to Tolkien's own description and illustrations. So you can go check that out if you're more interested to kind of go through the differences there. I think it's interesting to consider how Tolkien did depict him when he illustrated him. There are some pretty significant differences in how he appears in Jackson's film, which is probably how most of us tend to think of him, and how Tolkien may have actually envisioned him. Bushy eyebrows, extremely bushy eyebrows notwithstanding. So,
Yes.
All right. So it goes on, that Gandalf had very few treats, right? Very few treats for the Hobbit children who were all excited to see him. And this was kind of a little bit disappointing for them. He tells them to run away now. You will get plenty when the time comes. So they're pretty disappointed by that. There were a couple of things called out here. Squibs and crackers. I was interested. So I assumed his crackers were meant like firecrackers, not like actual crackers he was going to give them.
That makes sense.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
As far as like what a squib is, I looked this up, and here's the thing. I thought initially it sounded like what we might call a sparkler.
Okay.
But he uses the term sparkler late in a later section, right, as opposed to squib. So I'm
Meaning
not
that they're probably different.
right. So when we look on Wiktionary and see the etymology, possibly imitative of a small explosion, I'm wondering if this is more like I'm wondering if this is more like sort of a like a cherry bomb or something like that.
That's what I was wondering, or
right?
maybe like those little things that you kind of throw on the ground and they explode.
Yeah. Or maybe
Like a,
that's more of like a what do they call those things? Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Maybe that was what it was. Like that cherry bomb might be a little too much of an explosion, but those I can't remember.
I don't remember either.
I know the name of them, but I just can't think of them. But yeah, you might be right about that, because that is like a very tiny little explosion, right?
Yeah.
That happens when you throw those on the ground.
Just like a little pop.
Yeah, a little pop.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's my best guess. But if you know what a squib is, if you know what is being referred to here, then please drop us a comment.
Enlighten us, please.
Yes, enlighten us in whatever way you're able to communicate with us. So,
Yes.
all right. So once Gandalf is inside Bag End. We get a little conversation, a little snippet of a conversation between him and Bilbo. It says, inside Bag End, Bilbo and Gandalf were sitting at the open window of a small room looking out west onto the garden. The late afternoon was bright and peaceful. The flowers glowed red and golden. Snapdragons and sunflowers and nasturtiums trailing all over the turf walls and peeping in at the round windows. How bright your garden looks, said Gandalf. Yes, said Bilbo. I am very fond indeed of it, and of all the dear old Shire, but I think I need a holiday. You mean to go on with your plan, then? I do. I made up my mind months ago, and I haven't changed it. Very well. It is no good saying any more. Stick to your plan, your whole plan, mind, and I hope it will turn out for the best, for you and for all of us. I hope so. Anyway, I mean to enjoy myself on Thursday and have my little joke. Who will laugh, I wonder, said Gandalf, shaking his head. We shall see, said Bilbo. Yeah, so quite a few things that I noted about this particular section. First of all, the different types of flowers. So, one of the things I really want to do with this episode is when we get like descriptions, like words like snapdragons, nasturtiums, things that I have no earthly idea. I've heard maybe
you know
before.
What a snapdragon is?
Okay, let me finish. I know what a sunflower is, obviously, but snapdragons, right? I've heard of them, but I couldn't like point it out and tell you, right? I'm not a flower person, right? Like, I can tell you about certain things, right? Like there's certain areas where I'm like, yeah, I know what that is, right? But when it comes to flowers, I'm just like, yep, flowers, cool. I'm like sunflowers, daffodils because they grow all over my yard without me trying, and roses.
Yeah, I was gonna say roses.
Tulips, right? I can tell you like some of these more basic types of flowers, right?
Yeah.
Daisies, yep. I can do daisies, okay? Snapdragons and nasturtiums, not so. Do you know what a nasturtium is?
I do not know what a nasturtium is, and I'm really glad that you're going to tell us.
All right, well,
yeah.
Here we go. So, snapdragons. Let's go look at snapdragons here. Pull this up.
So pretty.
All right, share my screen here. So there is a snapdragon, and I'm like, yep, I can see why they're called snapdragons, because the heads look very much sort of like dragon's heads,
Yep.
Like it kind of resembles, the head of a dragon, I would say. But yeah, very pretty. Now I know what a snapdragon looks like. Mm-hmm. And then we have nasturtiums. Oh. And that's what nasturtiums look like right there. So they are actually, now I think we're going to save, there's a note in the Reader's Companion about nasturtiums, and I'm going to save that for the MATHOMS, because it gets that MATHOMS episode, which will be it once we've finished all of this first chapter, because it goes into a little more detail on confusion about what these are actually named. But you can see it's described as kind of this like red and gold, right? Like red and gold area outside of the window, right? With the sunflowers, the snapdragons, and the nasturtiums, and now you know why, right? Because that's a lot of red and a lot of gold, right? So I'm assuming it was very, very pretty.
Absolutely. I was a little surprised that Bilbo didn't give Sam or the old gaffer a shout out, because he's their gardener, right? I mean, it's not like Bilbo made it look that pretty. So I was kind of like, come on, Bilbo.
We don't know that he didn't. It just wasn't recorded here, is all.
That's fair.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Those are really interesting, because at first when you're pulling them up, I thought it was like what's it called, like a pansy or something? Not pansy. What's the right word? Anyway, it looks like it's the national flower of England, but then it also looks like it's a 3D element to it, kind of like an orange daffodil. So it's kind of interesting to me. It's an interesting flower. I'm excited to learn more about it.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So that is our lesson in flowers for this episode.
I love it.
Love it. So we will be stopping to smell, maybe not smell, but to visualize the flowers and the different things that we see, the different types of trees that we see along the way. So that will definitely be something we do in this epic run of episodes under the Do Not Be Hasty banner.
Is it surprising to you that these flowers are still blooming in September? It's a little surprising to me, because I feel like sunflowers bloom like earlier in the summer and then they're done. Maybe not. I don't know.
I
just don't. I don't usually associate September
Mhm.
with like flowers in full bloom.
Yeah.
But maybe the climate of the Shire was appropriate for that.
Yeah, it says that very month was September, right? So, and as fine a day as you could ask. I mean, it's still
Yeah, I guess
it's still fairly warm at that
yeah,
time
I
of
guess
year.
that's true. Yeah.
And maybe the Gamgees are just that good at gardening, right? They're
be.
just
They
they're
have
really good.
extra green thumbs and all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I have no idea how to respond to that, but
It just occurred to me.
yeah.
And I was like,
well, again, maybe if somebody out there is really into, was it horticulture?
yes,
Right.
that would be horticulture.
If someone's really into horticulture, then they can weigh in on whether that is an impossibility or what, right? So,
or maybe it's just again, maybe it's just like a breaking of the verisimilitude.
Yeah.
Could be.
The Shire itself is a fanciful sort of place, right?
Exactly.
Within this larger perilous realm of Middle Earth, right?
Yes, it's certainly described that way.
I mean, it really is, right?
Yeah,
It's
really
like
is.
it does sort of seem to be this peaceful little Edenish kind of place,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
When you consider all of the different places they go in this much wider world where things are much more dangerous.
Yeah.
Things are I don't know, and I feel like there's we're going to learn more about how Gandalf himself, and really throughout the history of the Shire, there have been other forces who have been sort of protected, like powerful forces that have been protective of the Shire, right? Which is interesting to me now that we are kind of considering it more deeply.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, well, Bilbo's plan. So what is Bilbo's plan? We're not told much right now. He needs a holiday, right? That's what he says.
Don't we all? We all need a holiday. Holiday, oh, holiday.
For goodness sakes, Bilbo, we'd all love to flee to the Cleve, club out at the flats, and have lunch with Little Richard. But we control ourselves. All right, yeah, you need a holiday. I get it, right? It would be so nice.
It would be.
And I love what Gandalf says to him. He says, stick to your plan. Your whole plan, mind, right? Like, it's like as if he knows that Bilbo might have a little something that he's going to deviate from his plan in order to keep with him, right? I just feel like Gandalf is implying something here.
Yeah.
Right. Your whole plan.
He obviously is.
We've talked about this plan, Bilbo.
Yeah.
And I know that you aren't always the best at sticking to your plans, and I really want you to stick to this plan, right? So I just thought that was worth noting, Gandalf's insistence.
So you think do you think it has to do with the ring?
I mean, that would be my guess. Now,
okay,
that's just speculation.
I.e., him leaving it behind as opposed to bringing it with him, maybe.
Yeah, and of course, I think in several sections down the road, we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see this come back up.
Yeah. Okay.
And it says Bilbo wants to have his little joke.
Yeah.
Right. Gandalf says, "Who will laugh? Who will laugh?"
That's such a Gandalf question.
I know. Who will laugh? I wonder.
Yeah.
Like, what do you make of Gandalf's little rhetorical question there? Like, do you think he's
yeah.
Do you think he's kind of rolling his eyes at Bilbo, or do you think he says he shakes his head? Or do you think he's kind of like, oh, these hobbits, they don't even know what's coming to, like, he's like in on Bilbo's joke, or he's kind of like, okay, Bilbo, I'll let you do this little joke, but I'm not really sure anybody's going to find it that funny.
I took it a little bit as kind of a challenge.
Yeah.
Like to Gandalf. It's almost, or Gandalf's challenge to Bilbo. Like, it's almost like another way of saying, is this really necessary? Like, asking him how is this going to benefit you? Like,
right.
what... maybe trying to get him to think through it a little bit more and figure out, is this worth it? Like, is it really, should it really be part of the plan?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I mean, I just think Gandalf is sort of, Gandalf is skeptical of, like, I mean, I think he's fine with Bilbo going through with the whole thing that he's planning on going through. And Gandalf is obviously in on all of the plans.
Yeah.
But I just think he's concerned that Bilbo has other motives, right? Has maybe other motives that Bilbo might not even be aware of, right?
Yeah.
And that there may be other things that are in operation here. So
just trying to get him to think more deeply about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, And Bilbo says, "We shall see. We shall see who will laugh."
Yeah. Time will tell.
So it says the next day, more carts rolled up the hill, and still more carts. There might have been some grumbling about dealing locally, but that very week orders began to pour out of Bag End for every kind of provision, commodity, or luxury that could be obtained in Hobbiton or Bywater or anywhere in the neighborhood. People became enthusiastic, and they began to tick off the days on the calendar, and they watched eagerly for the postman, hoping for invitations. So this little quip about this grumbling about dealing locally, you can kind of understand, right? All the Shire being a very insular community. They're all wondering, like, okay, you've got all these dwarves coming in with their carts, and you got this old wizard coming in with his cart, and that's where apparently you're sending all of your money elsewhere. Maybe you could help some of the local mom and pops out, right, by supporting our businesses. And eventually he does. It's I guess there were certain things he could not get in the Shire, and so he felt the need to get those from outside of the Shire. But eventually he proves that he is indeed dealing locally as well.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, I feel like there was a note earlier on. I did miss a note. And then there's two more notes that I want to come back to in the Reader's Companion. All right. So, I have titled this episode Gandalf, the keeper of the secret fireworks, right? So Gandalf is, of course, the keeper of the secret fire, right? And so I thought it was funny that he's got the keeper of the secret fireworks. You see what I did there? Okay, now that I've explained that joke to everybody.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I'm sure it wasn't clear. So I'm going to read this from the Reader's Companion. This is an interesting little just thought on the connection between the keeper of the secret fire and the fireworks. Tolkien, in 1968, Tolkien wrote to Donald Swann, "Fireworks have no special relation to me. They appear in the books, and would have done even if I disliked them, because they are part of the representation of Gandalf, bearer of the Ring of Fire, the Kindler, the most childlike aspect shown to the hobbits before being fireworks. But this is an argument after the fact. Gandalf was already associated with fireworks in The Hobbit, and fireworks reappeared in The Lord of the Rings with the second version of A Long-Expected Party, long before Tolkien conceived the three elven rings." So I guess it just so worked out that Gandalf, was the keeper of the Red Ring, right? The Ring of Fire of the three elven rings, because he had already appeared with fireworks in The Hobbit before the elven rings were even conceived of by Tolkien, right, as part of the Legendarium. But still, I think it's cool that he's so into fireworks and he is the keeper of the secret fire. So it just kind of works out well for the Legendarium that's the case.
Mm-hmm. Is that what this comment here where it says his real... Well, it says, the old man was Gandalf, the wizard, whose fame in the Shire was due mainly to his skill with fire, smokes, and lights. Mm-hmm. His real business was far more difficult and dangerous, but the Shire folk knew nothing about it. So is that... like Keeper of the Ring of Fire, is that what you said it was called?
Yeah.
Is that what that's alluding to? His real business, far more difficult and dangerous?
Well, I think it's just alluding to that he has a much larger mission here in Middle Earth, right? It's kind of what I was getting at by saying, he is this god, right? He's a lesser god of the Blessed Realm, and they just think he's this doddering old magician,
gotcha. Yeah.
Right?
They can't appreciate
who's buddies with Bilbo, right?
Okay.
So they have. They have no idea that this great figure, right, is amongst them.
Yeah. They have no idea what kind of company they're keeping.
That's right.
Kind of cool.
Yeah. And then just to the last note I wanted to read from the Reader's Companion for this episode is regarding the anachronisms of this section, and really again
what an anachronism
so an anachronism would be like it doesn't make sense existing in the time that it apparently does, right? So there's I would say again the Shire is the place where these occur the most, right? And here's what Hammond and Skull have to say about that. Let's see. These and many other details confirm that the Shire is, as Tolkien said, based on rural England at the end of the 19th century. Calendars on which one could tick off dates, a postal service with local offices, written invitations to parties, fireworks, silk waistcoats, party crackers, tissue paper, mothballs, umbrellas, inkwells, bookcases, etc. The tone had been set in The Hobbit with Bilbo's engagement tablet, doorbell, tea kettle, clock on the mantelpiece, pocket handkerchiefs, and so forth. So if the thought is that these legends take place in a period of our own world that was thousands and thousands of years ago, well before the birth of Christ, right? Really almost like prehistory, right? As we would see it. It just doesn't make any sense that all of those things would exist, like at least from what we understand, right?
Is this talking specifically about like the dates on the calendar?
No. It's talking about things like a postal service, written invitations to parties, fireworks, silk waistcoats, right? So Bilbo loves wearing silk waistcoats, right? Like he wouldn't have, nobody back in that period of time would have known what a silk waistcoat was, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
So again, it's there's this sense in which like, and for me, the more I think about this, is to me it's like when Tolkien was in the business of producing, like, so remember, the world of Middle Earth, the legendarium of Middle Earth was a thing that well preexisted The Hobbit, right? Tolkien had been working on what became the stories of the Silmarillion for more than a decade, close to 2 decades, when he wrote The Hobbit, and then just kind of by happenstance happened to connect that world with just a few like minor characters within The Hobbit to the larger world. And then with The Lord of the Rings, he just went all in on that, right? And connected it to that larger world of the Silmarillion in the First Age. He didn't... It to me, like, he... there's another work called The Lost Road, right? Where he... which was how he sort of first dreamed up the Legend of Numenor. And it was basically a time travel story that he wrote where... the characters lived basically would have been contemporaries of Tolkien, but then like somehow wound up back in the age of Numenor, like many thousands of years before, right? This like ancient history. And I feel like that was something of what he was using here with The Hobbit and in Lord of the Rings, where he was taking this thing that would be somewhat familiar with the hobbits and the way that their society was organized. And he was sort of inviting us into that world through their world, right? So you wouldn't just be dropped right into the middle of this world of the Silmarillion, which was, so like just this ancient epic. So I feel like that's what makes The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings so successful, and it makes them so like one of the key things, right? And it makes them so unique is it like it draws people into the world through something that seems pretty familiar, right? Like, of course, none of us live in the Shire in 2024, or even in 2001, or even in the 1950s necessarily. But it's at least, we're at least proximate enough to it in history, close enough to it in history that like it's not completely foreign to us, Like if he just dropped us into the world of like Rohan, or if he dropped us into the world of Gondor, if those things might seem much more foreign to us. You see what I'm saying? So that allows us to kind of enter into those greater stories through the world of the hobbits here initially. So
it's interesting that you brought that up, because honestly, that never even it never even occurred to me that, hey, wait a second, they wouldn't have had a postman, all those years ago. It just never even occurred to me.
Yeah, I know it doesn't occur to me either.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like it doesn't have to be. I don't know. I don't know necessarily that you couldn't argue that this takes place long enough. All right, so it's not real history. Okay, first of all, we know that. All right, I know sometimes we like to talk about how it is real history. It's just kind of lost history. But we have no like reason to think that like Tolkien was recording actual history that was lost or something like that, right? Now, there are some Tolkien fans that will take issue with me saying that. Some Tolkien fans are convinced that he actually had access to these ancient stories. If you want to send me the evidence for that, that's fine. But I have no reason to think that. But that he was sort of playing with this scheme of composing an ancient history that would sort of fit with our world, right? And I guess all I'm trying to get at in this particular case, and I think this is something we'll talk about a lot over the course of this series. I don't know that it's impossible that somebody who lived, we'll just throw a number out there, 6,000 years ago, right? And the history of their existence is just kind of completely lost to us, right? We have no historical record of it or anything like that. Why couldn't they have had silk waistcoats? I don't know. Like maybe it's just a lost civilization, right? Like that was a lot more advanced than we realized. And I feel like there's indications that certain lost civilizations were a lot more advanced than we realized, right? Than we may think, right?
I mean, look at the pyramids.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's not even a lost civilization either.
It's not. But they built those without any kind of like semblance of modern machinery, right?
Yeah.
So you make a good point.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just interesting to think about. I don't advance any of that as anything like science or history or anything like that in a proper sense, but just kind of a thought experiment. Like, yes, they are anachronistic in the sense that like they much more resemble the 19th century than anything that we know of about the ancient world. But why couldn't it be part of some lost civilization to have had, silk waistcoats or post offices?
Right. Yeah. Right? Why not? But it is also, in the fact just, that it didn't really occur to either one of us that this actually maybe was anachronistic, is just maybe a hat tip to Tolkien and what how well he does crafting this world where you just kind of fully enter into it and you're just so kind of in it that you're like, well, of course this makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Of course, we might call that the I think that's the thing is like, some people talk about the willful suspension of disbelief. I think in this case he didn't like that, right? He didn't think that was good fantasy. He wanted the unwillful suspension of disbelief, right? Like that there wasn't even, like it would seem so real that you just believed it anyway, right? Without even thinking about it. So that's what you're getting at, right?
That's totally what I'm getting at.
This sort of enchantment,
right? Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Well, good stuff.
Yeah, that was great.
Good stuff. Did I miss anything that you wanted to highlight?
No, you hit everything all the questions that I had in my brain.
All right.
Yeah, that was great.
Right on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, even in these early portions of The Lord of the Rings, we begin to see the greater connection of the Shire to the outside world. Indeed, how many of the hobbits knew that Gandalf was no mere wandering magician, but in fact a powerful god whose memory and existence stretched back beyond the creation of Arda itself? Though the Shire is a very small place in the grand scheme of Middle-earth, it is about to be lifted up to a greater significance, one its residents would hardly be able to fathom. In the next episode, Bilbo's birthday party finally arrives. Join us as we take stock of the festivities. All right, we hope you all enjoyed this episode. If you did, please consider supporting us in one or all of the following ways. Greta?
First, join the Fellowship of the Road by visiting patreon.com/TolkienRoad. When you join the Fellowship of the Road, it helps you to keep on... you and us, actually. Yes. It helps all of us to keep on evering on and lands you some cool perks along the way. Learn more at patreon.com/TolkienRoad.
Second, if you're watching, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and let us know what's on your mind in the comments below.
Finally, subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes or the platform of your choice. If you are a 5-star fan of the Tolkien Road, you can really help us out by heading over to iTunes or your preferred source for the show and dropping us a rating and review. When you do that, it helps us get the word out about the Tolkien Road, which helps us to keep on evering on.
As always, keep the correspondence coming. We'll do our best to respond to you somehow and at some point. With Don't Be Hasty, we'll let the mail pile up and then do a big mailbag episode at the end of each chapter. We can't promise you that it will be read on air, but we'll do our best, and some correspondence most certainly will.
You or me?
You.
Me, yeah. All right. Don't forget to stop by TrueMythsPress.com for great merch like super styling and comfy Tolkien Road t-shirts, 2 Trees camper mugs, and signed copies of John's books.
Once again, that's TrueMythsPress.com. Thanks for supporting our work with your purchase. To close, as always, we'd like to thank our amazing fellowship. Our love for you goes up to 11. Special thanks to the following: John R.,
Kaitlyn of Tea with Tolkien,
Melkor 27,
KG,
Emilio P,
Jonathan D,
Richard K,
Paul D,
Julia,
Werty,
Chris B,
Tour91,
Carolyn S,
Emiel K,
Brian O. II,
Jonathan R,
Matthew W,
Daniel D,
Harrison C,
Seb M,
Ms. Anonymous,
Andrew T,
Redhawk,
Shannon S,
Brian O. I,
Zeke F,
James L,
Chris L,
Asya V,
Ish of the Hammer,
Teresa C,
David of Pints with Jack.
and Eric B.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all so much. We truly appreciate our fellowship. And thanks so much to everyone for watching and or listening. We will talk at you next time.
Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.